What if Bakugo received one for all? In the world of My Hero Academia, 80% of the human population possesses supernatural abilities, known as quirks. And the other 20%, the quirkless, are at best looked down upon, but at worst, actively bullied and harassed. This is the foundation of the dynamic between series protagonist Izuku Midoriya and his former best friend and eventual rival Katsuki Bakugo. The latter born with a powerful and versatile combination of his parents' quirks that allows him to create explosions with his sweat, the former being born with nothing despite both of his parents having quirks of their own, thus being increasingly ostracized and mocked by Bakugo as he grows. At the outset of the series, Midoriya has accepted his quirkless nature and still tries to remain friends with Bakugo, who has long since let his power and the praise it brings him get to his head, and idolizes All Might, the most famous and powerful Quirk-wielding hero of all time. A chance encounter with All Might after another act of heroism leads to Izuku learning the truth about his current state, that All Might suffers from a grievous injury that only lets him use his powers for 3 hours a day, a limit that he's just reached, and is told once again that his quirkless nature will prevent him from becoming a hero. But when the villain breaks out and holds Bakugo hostage, Midoriya leaps in to save him despite his own powerlessness, earning the respect of All Might and prompting him to pass his power onto Izuku, formally training him as his successor in the process. Thus begins Izuku's journey to become the greatest hero of all. But what if it hadn't gone down that way? What if it were Bakugo who had learned All Might's secret and Izuku who had been captured by the villain? And what if Bakugo still proved himself a worthy successor of All Might, enough so to receive the latter's quirk? Well, that's what we're here to guess at. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers subscribe, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Early school life. To begin our alternate universe tale, Bakugo will be at the scene of All Might's initial defeat of the sludge villain. While not as obsessive as Midoriya, Bakugo is also a huge fan of All Might, and has always been inspired by him. So in this instance, cocky and confident as he is, Bakugo decides to follow All Might when he leaves, in hopes of getting his foot in the door of the hero world and the eye of the most prominent hero on his talent, but is flat-footed when he sees All Might revert to his frail, wounded self on a rooftop. "What the hell?" Bakugo says as he sees the muscular hero almost deflate to skeletal form. Bakugo confronts All Might, demanding to know what this is all about and if he's been some sort of fraudster this whole time, and so All Might reveals that this is the result of a fierce battle he waged against a mysterious villain many years ago, and has hindered his ability to fight crime ever since by restricting him to a mere 3 hours of usage every day, which he's just used up. Though not as furious as he was, and not intending to tell anyone about this, Bakugo is still critical of All Might for this, believing he should simply soldier through the pain and force himself to be active for more than 3 hours a day, and departs in disgust, leaving All Might also less than impressed by the young man's attitude. However, the sludge villain from before has broken free of his containment and taken a hostage, none other than Midoriya himself, who was unfortunately passing by at the time. Midoriya's screams are cut off by the sludge villain. "Oh, we don't want anyone interrupting us, do we?" On his way back, Bakugo catches wind of the commotion and is initially ready to leave it to a licensed hero, as he's not allowed to use his powers to fight crime yet. But then, in the roiling sludge, he catches sight of Midoriya's face. "Is that Deku? Damn Deku!" he shouts in anger as his defenseless, weak friend is unable to protect himself. Something within him sparks. Even though he's relentlessly bullied Midoriya for his quirkless status over the past few years, having gone so far as to even tell him to kill himself, Bakugo has a realization upon seeing the young boy actually in harm's way. Somewhere, deep down, he still cares about his former friend and couldn't live with himself if he let Midoriya get hurt or killed. Though his brain is running through all the possible perils and consequences of interfering, not the least of which being barred from becoming a licensed hero altogether, Bakugo's body moves on its own, and before he knows it, Bakugo has rushed over to the sludge villain and begins blasting away pieces of his body, subconsciously avoiding any collateral damage to Midoriya or passers-by. However, fierce as he may be, Bakugo is not strong or skilled enough to take on an actual villain in combat, and the sludge begins to subsume him as well, while the villain gloats. "Damn it!" Deku looks up at his friend, tears in his eyes, his mouth having been freed momentarily. "Kachan, save yourself!" Bakugo sneers. Damn nerd! He continues blasting away to no avail. All Might, having been watching from afar in his weakened form, realizes the hero he was waiting for has appeared, and that to an extent, Bakugo was right about him letting his limitations control him. Shifting into his muscled form once more, All Might goes plus ultra and rushes in to put the sludge villain down for the count, claiming in the moment that Bakugo deserves praise for softening the villain up for him. In the aftermath, an angry Bakugo scolds Midoriya for potentially endangering his prospect of attending a high school like the prestigious UA and becoming a hero, but All Might meets him on his way home from the scene of the battle and reveals that he not only smoothed over any legal issues Bakugo is facing for his actions to avoid a good deed being punished, but he's taken Bakugo's words to heart and realizes the young man has the potential to become a great hero in his own right. Knowing he was long overdue for a successor to pass on his power to, All Might offers Bakugo a great gift to help him on his journey, his very own quirk. One for all. Bakugo is initially reluctant to accept this, and perhaps a bit more disgusted by the method of transference, as he's quite proud of his explosion quirk and doesn't see the need for such a helping hand. But All Might appeals to his pride and explains that not only will this mean that there's a bearer of the quirk who can use it throughout the day, but it will allow Bakugo to take on villains that would otherwise be beyond his capabilities to engage or defeat, such as the one who dealt him his crippling injury. After a day of mental deliberation, Bakugo accepts and begins training with All Might to strengthen his body enough to withstand the power of One for All, though he adapts quickly to the intense weight and endurance training due to already keeping his body in shape to withstand the blowback of his explosions. After clearing an entire beach of heavy trash, partly with explosions, Bakugo is deemed ready by All Might and consumes some of his hair, initiating the transfer for One for All, although he initially does not feel any difference. Ugh, when was the last time you washed your hair, old bastard? All Might was not amused. Bakugo clenches his fists. So, when is this supposed to take effect? Then comes the entrance exam for UA. Having done amazingly in both classwork and quirk development his whole life, Bakugo is a shoo-in for the new class, though he has to take part in the school's entrance exam to determine his placement. Battling artificial villains for points alongside the other applicants, Bakugo sees the oncoming 0-point villain, a massive robot, as not worth his time and rushes toward the exit, only for Uraraka Ochako, a young girl with the power to induce weightlessness, to become trapped under some rubble, unable to free herself while the robot advances on her. Though he doesn't want to fully engage with the robot because he risks crossing the finish line late, Bakugo does let off an explosion at the knee level to cripple it and stop its advance, thinking it'll make him look better to the judges, then rushes off. But the damage done to the robot is more severe than he anticipated due to One for All slightly amplifying his explosive potential, and the shower of debris that rains down as it collapses breaks Uraraka's leg, taking her out of the running altogether and preventing her from joining the new class of 1A. While not directly blamed for the incident, as the robot was running out of control prior, Bakugo is quietly stunned over this. Had he exercised more caution or moved to directly pull Uraraka out, he could have prevented this tragedy altogether. This sows the seeds for him to become a more careful hero going forward, now concerned not only with minimizing direct collateral damage, but also the fallout of any damage he does to his surroundings. From here, Bakugo's school life goes more or less swimmingly. He's befriended by Eijiro Kirishima, who can harden his skin into a rock-like substance, and excels at his studies and power training activities. However, for the first time in his life, he encounters a difficulty with his quirk. Well, his new quirk, as the sheer power of One for All is still too much for his body to handle, even with the training he underwent with All Might. And he discovers that while he can safely use fractions of it, concentrating 100% of the power into any of his limbs or digits is guaranteed to break them. So he finds even more reason to restrain himself in combat as the power starts coming out instinctively in tandem with explosion. Then comes a day where Class 1A is tasked with completing a disaster simulation, meant to train them in responding to real-world cataclysmic events, only for a true disaster to unfold when the area is invaded by a swarm of villains. The League of Villains, led by an enigmatic but darkly promising young man named Tomura Shigaraki, with detached hands clasped all over his body. Most of the class is scared, except for Bakugo, who seems to sneer at him. "These are the stupidest villains alive." He cracks his neck and pops his knuckles as he draws closer. "I'm gonna kick every single one of their asses." While his fellow students and their teachers scramble to evacuate and contain the threat, Bakugo decides that his prize will be the defeat of Tomura, who seems far too lanky and detached to be much of a threat, and moves in to knock him out with a blast from one of his new explosive gauntlets, only for Tomura to simply reach out a hand and disintegrate half of it in a few seconds. Bakugo quickly realizes this villain is far more dangerous than he appears, and Tomura seems to have taken a strange interest in Bakugo himself, having the monstrous Nomu brought with him move to restrain Bakugo so he can be brought back with them. Bakugo struggles and prepares to fight, feeling he might have bitten off a little more than he can chew.
"Come on, bird brains, you don't scare me!"
he shouts, less for the creature's sake and more for his own. Before the two can exchange any more words or blows, however, All Might bursts in, supremely furious at the attack, and begins to mop the floor with the Nomu, who proved too strong for even Bakugo's strongest explosion to phase. Realizing that this is the power gap All Might spoke of in their first meeting, Bakugo instinctively covers for the latter while his time limit runs out in the cloud of dust left by the fierce battle, in order to preserve his secret, leaving them both to ponder the day's events. The Sports Festival. Sometime later, UA puts on a sports festival between Class 1A and its rival 1B, filled with students whose quirks are just as varied as those of Bakugo and his classmates. Seeing yet another opportunity to prove himself, Bakugo leaps at the chance to win the gold medal and excels at the first activity of racing across a forest, but is nonplussed when he learns that the second activity will involve teamwork and not just competition. Nonetheless, he makes the most of being teamed up with Kirishima and Mina Ashido, who can release highly corrosive acid.
"Just don't slow me down, you weaklings!"
Bakugo shouts at them, drawing ire from Mina, with Kirishima, though a bit angered, still slightly intrigued by the manly nature of Bakugo to so callously confront them like that. When confronted by Nito Monoma, an even more smug 1B student whose quirk lets him copy other quirks, though he tries to prove himself superior to Bakugo and the rest of 1A, Monoma is put on the back foot when his attempt to copy Bakugo's explosion instead copies One for All, which does nothing for him since his body has no built-up energy to draw from, allowing Bakugo to swiftly knock him down with a quirkless punch and steal all of his points to advance with his classmates. In the festival's first round of one-on-one matches, Bakugo faces off against Hantasero, who can create tape from his elbows. Bakugo expects this to be an easy matchup.
"You're trying to make it as a hero, huh?"
Bakugo taunts.
"You seem like you'd fit in more at the UPS. Why don't you save us both the trouble and just forfeit?"
Sero seems to grow angered at this.
"Fireworks, huh? I didn't know it was New Year's."
Sero fires back. Bakugo sneers as sparks begin to pop from his fingers.
"Oh, now I'm gonna have to hurt you, you dumb bastard."
The battle begins. Bakugo initially is very surprised by Sero's versatility with his tape and is nearly ringed out and pulled off balance by several near invisible lines of tape toward the edge, but an activation of One for All at 15% gives him the leg strength to push his body forward, break the tape, and blast himself into Sero with a body slam hard enough to knock him out. The second match is where Bakugo is really put to the test. A student from outside 1A and 1B, Hitoshi Shinso, stares him down from the other side of the ring. "Such an angry child," Shinso says. "You snap at everyone, acting like you're the big dog. Makes me wonder if you're compensating for something."
"Compensating?"
Bakugo shouts.
"I'll show you compensating when I send your scrawny ass back to the loser classroom."
Before he can make good on his promise, however, Bakugo suddenly finds himself unable to control his body as Shinso simply orders him to walk outside the ring, having caught Bakugo with his biggest weakness, his ego. With his body doing this of his own accord, Bakugo's mind remains free, and he quickly realizes Shinso's quirk lets him control the body of anyone who responds to his voice, leaving him frustrated at falling so easily into the trap. However, Bakugo abruptly begins seeing 8 shadowy figures huddled in the arena exit before him, which urge him to snap out of the control by force, and through sheer determination to win, Bakugo channels 100% of All for One into his right index finger, breaking it and inflicting enough pain to break through Shinso's control, to the latter's great surprise. With considerable effort, Bakugo restrains himself from saying anything to Shinso despite the latter's taunts. Bakugo rushes Shinso with all of the rage he had built up and blasts him in the chest so hard that he knocks the boy into the wall, leaving a crater in it shaped like the love child of Stu Pickles. Despite his initial antipathy towards the young man for his tactics, Bakugo realizes from listening to the crowd's jeers about Shinso's quirk that he's been looked down upon for having a power seemingly tailor-made for a villain, even though he wants to be nothing more than a hero, which he sympathizes with to a certain extent due to the violence of his own quirk eliciting similar remarks in the past. At last, Bakugo reaches the finals, and the student he expected from the start to meet him there, Shoto Todoroki, a prodigy in his own right whose quirk uniquely combines the ice and fire quirks of his parents to allow him to use both elements at once, though he has never used flames in all the time Bakugo has known him. Having overheard an earlier confrontation between Shoto and his father, the number 2 hero Endeavor, Bakugo knows that this is due to Endeavor raising Shoto in an abusive and grueling training environment of a household, all in the name of making him strong enough to surpass All Might, and is troubled by the similarities in his and Endeavor's goals and behavior, but pushes this out of his mind so as to not let sympathy hold him back against Shoto. Bakugo smiles.
The son of the number 2 hero. I've been waiting for a true worthy opponent. But as the son of the number 2, you're fated to be number 2. Always. And I will be number 1. I will be the new All Might.
Todoroki does not respond to Bakugo's statements. He's angered at being compared to his father, but all the same, he sees too much of his father in his opponent, too much to stomach a conversation with him. The two begin their duel, and though his explosions prove quite a good match against Shoto's ice due to their heat and force, Bakugo begins to grow annoyed at Shoto for not using all of his power, as he doesn't feel like he's proving himself if his opponent is fighting with a handicap, and dares Shoto to prove that he can use his flames to prove himself rather than support his father. Shoto's flames flicker from his right arm for an instant, but quickly die down again as Bakugo's argument clashes with his self-esteem issues and shatters against them. Dejected, Bakugo pushes through an avalanche of ice produced by Shoto by combining a 35% all-for-one punch with a maximum strength explosion from his right fist, badly straining his arm but pushing the explosive force and heat through the ice to reach Shoto, who's knocked back into the wall. Though declared the winner, Bakugo remains discontent, having discovered the victory to be more hollow than expected. Bakugo cries as he holds his arm.
So long as you remain chained to your past, you'll never be free to chase your future. I'll never be chained like you. I'll never be chained.
In the following days, an incident with one of his classmates, Tenya Ida, catches Bakugo's attention. Ida's brother, the hero Ingenium, had been crippled by an attack from the so-called hero killer Stain, which sets the normally cheery and law-abiding Ida on a dark path. While assigned to work under the number 4 hero, Best Jeanist, whose style and ethos clash heavily with his own, Bakugo also trains with Gran Torino, a former mentor to All Might who understands One For All better than almost any other hero, and teaches him to spread One For All throughout his body in a slight percentage instead of concentrating it all in one place, granting him a physical boost that doesn't tear apart his body. Bakugo seems to get this faster than Gran Torino expected, showing a slight prodigious nature. It's disgusting to Gran Torino the sheer irreverence the boy shows from having such a massive ego, but what's even more disgusting is that he has all the power to back up what his mouth spews. During a patrol of Best Jeanist sector, Bakugo is caught up in a large-scale Nomu attack on the city orchestrated by Shigaraki, who is aligned with Stain on the grounds that they both wish to see the current society of heroes destroyed, and deduces from context clues that Ida is going after Stain for revenge. However, due to clashing with several Nomu on his way to Ida's approximate location, Bakugo arrives too late. Stain has killed Ida after the latter refused to stop seeking revenge, stunning Bakugo with the reality of death. Engaging Stain in a quiet anger, Bakugo is caught off guard by the latter's quirk of paralyzing anyone whose blood he ingests, which Stain secures by lightly cutting Bakugo's shoulder when he overextends during an application of his explosive gauntlet's concentrated AP shot attack. But before Stain can finish him off as well, Bakugo is saved by the arrival of Kirishima and Momo Yayorozu, a young girl with the power to create inanimate objects with her body fat, with Kirishima defending them with his body too hard for Stain to cut, and Yayorozu creating various restraints around the alleyway they're fighting in. Bakugo rockets high into the air and delivers the finishing blow with howitzer impact, slamming into a restrained Stain with enough force not only to knock him out, but to paralyze it from the waist down with damage to his spinal cord. A bit of revenge for Ida and his brother's fate. Despite this, Bakugo and his classmates remain haunted by Ida's demise and return to their patrol duties with varying anxiety and depression. It was only now sinking into Bakugo what it truly meant to be a hero, and what the potential costs were for this. Stain caused him to realize the truth about heroes, the kind of hero All Might was, and the kind of hero he himself was expected to be. It's not for fame and glory, Bakugo thought to himself. It's about the people we serve, and we serve them with everything we have, at any cost, even the cost of our lives. Final exams. In the wake of recent events, UA conducts its final exams for Class 1A with grave seriousness, as the teachers illustrate to their students the kind of lethality and danger they'll be facing as professional heroes. Bakugo teams up with Kirishima against All Might, and despite the latter's power, the two form an effective team that respectively plays offense and defense perfectly in sync to stalemate All Might long enough to escape the boundaries of their combat zone and pass the exam. Following this, the whole class, along with Shinso, is sent to a training camp in the forest to specifically strengthen their quirks. Bakugo is given hot water to hold to expand his sweat glands and increase the power of his explosions, though he simultaneously works to strengthen his muscles with isometric exercises that focus on his core and limbs. He also learns of a young boy on the premises, Koda, whose hero parents were killed in a villain attack, reminding him once again of Ida and the cost of being a hero. However, the training is thrown off course when the League of Villains attacks once again with no clear motive. With his fellow students battling dangerous escaped criminals across the forest, Bakugo comes across a sadistic villain named Muscular, with the power to drastically thicken and control his muscle fibers for powerful attacks, menacing Koda, who has recognized Muscular as his parents' killer. Remembering what happened to Ochako and Ida, and unwilling to let another innocent person get hurt through his carelessness, Bakugo abandons course on regrouping with his classmates and swoops in to engage Muscular, who's delighted to find a suitably strong opponent among 1A.
Another wannabe hero to kill. You're strong though, aren't ya? Then give me the fight of my life.
With his control over One For All not yet perfected, Bakugo initially tries to hold off Muscular with Explosion alone and succeeds in inflicting some burns, but Muscular traps Bakugo in his muscle fibers and begins squeezing him to death, breaking his arm equipment in the process and rendering him unable to safely detonate any of his sweat due to the heat having nowhere to go.
What's the matter, little hero? Just not all cut out for the real world? I expected more from the champion of the sports festival. Is this really all UA High has to offer?
Just before Bakugo slips into unconsciousness, Koda distracts Muscular with a splash from his water-based quirk, and Bakugo realizes that while the glory of saving the day is one part of being a hero, inspiring others to stand up in the face of the impossible adversity and give everything they've got matters just as much. With a manic grin on his face, Bakugo declares that he can't let a little kid upstage him in courage and instinctively channels One For All at 50% throughout his entire body, letting him break free of the muscle fibers before redirecting it all to his arms at 100%, slamming them both palm first into Muscular's chest and releasing a powerful concentrated explosion that pushes aside his remaining fibers to blast him directly in the heart, leaving Muscular slamming through the rock wall behind him and nearly catatonic from the internal damage to his body. Though his arms are mangled by this, Bakugo remains conscious and has Koda lead him through the forest on foot back to the main camp, where he witnesses the true goal of the League of Villains being fulfilled, silently kidnapping Shinso, who takes control of Bakugo when the latter yells at him for getting caught to force him not to follow through the portal that the villains take to their hideout. Distraught at the idea of losing another classmate, Bakugo is told that he and the other students are under no circumstances allowed to try and rescue Shinso, as the professional heroes will be handling the operation instead due to the high threat level of his captors. Despite this, Bakugo refuses to obey the edict due to blaming his laxness for Shinso's capture, and formulates a plan with Kirishima, Sero, Yayorozu, and Mina to retrieve Shinso. Managing to track Shinso down to an abandoned building after Yayorozu provides them with disguises, Bakugo is impressed when Shinso abjectly refuses the villain's offer to join them, because he still wishes to become a true and honest hero like All Might, despite the nature of his power. Suddenly, after witnessing the hero's attacks on the villain's hideout, Bakugo finds himself uncharacteristically frightened alongside his classmates upon seeing Shigaraki's master and All Might's nemesis, All For One, appear and decimate the heroes in seconds with his vast power. In a rage, All Might engages All For One in a furious rematch, creating great chaos across several city blocks and leaving a still-bound Shinso in harm's way, now much further away due to an explosive clash between All Might and All For One, propelling him back. With his respect for Shinso grown, Bakugo elects to be the one to save him personally. Mina and Kirishima hold off the remaining villains, who try to intervene as Sero ties Bakugo up with his tape and hurls him across the battlefield, with Bakugo using a One For All enhanced kick off the ground and more explosions from his feet in the air to reach Shinso just before a casual spear from All For One can impale him. Despite the agony in his arms, Bakugo persists in grabbing onto Shinso and moving him a safe distance from the fight, allowing All Might to truly cut loose and battle All For One to another standstill. Suddenly, the wound in his side, inflicted by All For One years ago, rears its head, and All Might reaches the limit of his power usage, which has slowly been decreasing ever since he transferred One For All to Bakugo, revealing his true emaciated form to the world. Though initially stunned, the citizens watching the battle begin cheering on All Might regardless, with Bakugo tearfully leading the cries for his victory upon realizing that he is the reason that All Might has been reduced to this state. Heartened by this, All Might calls upon the last embers of One For All within him and performs the mighty United States of Smash against All For One, defeating him once again at the cost of permanently depowering himself, before simply raising his hand to the cameras filming him and telling the world, but primarily Bakugo, "You're next." In the aftermath of this titanic clash, uncertain of his future and racked with guilt over All Might's fate, Bakugo receives strange news from Recovery Girl, the on-site nurse for UA. Though she managed to heal his external and muscle injuries, albeit leaving some scars, tests she ran on Bakugo's body revealed that his internal organs are not working as effectively as they should be for a teenager, almost as if they belong in the body of a 30-year-old. But how could this be possible? Bakugo wonders what's going on about this. Then All Might enters the room. Katsuki, I think we should talk. And that's where I'm gonna call it for the day. My Hero Academia is one of my favorite anime of all time. It can be really dramatic, slightly sappy, but just like Demon Slayer, it manages to scratch the emotional itch my brain desires on a weekly basis. The idea of Bakugo getting one for all instead of Deku is a concept that draws immense fascination from me. Midoriya and Bakugo, though very different, both possess the same admiration for All Might. We've seen what he can do in Heroes Rising, and every time I watch that movie, I can't help but go over the scenario in my own mind. But what about you? What do you think about the video? Did you enjoy it? If so, leave a comment below telling us all about it, and don't forget to click that like button. Helps us tons. And if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos as they drop. Thanks for watching. Peace out.